I grew up in a town you could drive through in 15 minutes. A place where people know your last name before they learn your first, where every choice sticks to you like the dust on the old highway running through Main Street. I never expected anything in my life to change here, not really. At 24, I was working at a small hardware store on the edge of town, saving money without knowing for what, stuck in a rhythm so dull I stopped noticing it. And then she walked in. It was a Tuesday evening in early fall, right before closing. The sunlight came in low and orange, cutting across the aisles and making the whole place look warmer than it ever felt. I heard the bell over the door ring, and when I looked up, she was standing there like she was debating whether she should even be inside. A woman in her mid-30s, maybe 34 or 35. Dark hair pulled loosely over one shoulder, a leather jacket draped over a gray t-shirt, jeans, boots, confident posture. Not the kind you normally see around here. When she looked at me, it felt like she was sizing me up in a single second. Me, the store, the whole town. "Do you have paint remover?" she asked. Her voice was low, calm, and controlled. The kind of voice that carried its own weight. I showed her where it was, trying not to stare, trying not to let her notice whatever was happening in my chest. She asked questions, sharp, specific ones, and I tried to answer without sounding clueless. She smiled twice. Tiny smiles, barely there, but enough to make my face warm. "I'm Olivia," she finally said when we walked back to the register. I told her my name, and she repeated it softly, like she was testing its shape. She paid and turned to leave, but something made her stop. She studied me the way someone studies a sign on a trail they're not sure they should take. "You look like someone who's bored of living in one place for too long," she said. Am I right? I didn't know what to say. No one ever called out the truth that bluntly around here. Before I could answer, she stepped out the door. Most people in town would have forgotten it by the next morning. But not me. And apparently, not her. Because 2 nights later, she came back. This time she didn't pretend to need anything. She leaned against the counter, tapping her fingers, watching me with the same unreadable expression. "You want to grab a drink somewhere that's not this fluorescent nightmare?" she asked. I should have hesitated. She was older, confident, mysterious. I didn't know a thing about her. But the truth is, I was drowning in monotony, and she looked like a storm. So I said yes. We ended up at a quiet bar off County Road, the kind of place where no one bothers you, where jukebox country music drowned out anyone's secrets. She didn't talk like other people here. She had opinions, sharp ones, and she wasn't afraid to voice them. But she also listened, really listened, in a way that made me talk more than I ever do. "Why here?" I asked finally. "Why this town?" She smirked. Let's just say I owed myself a return. A strange answer. But I didn't push. I should have. Looking back now, that night wasn't just the beginning of something. It was the spark that ignited everything that followed. The love, the chaos, the betrayal, the revenge I never thought I'd be capable of. And she knew that long before I did. Olivia and I fell into a pattern faster than I expected, like gravity had already decided for us. After that first night at the bar, she started showing up everywhere. Sometimes at the hardware store, sometimes outside after my shift, leaning against her car like she owned the pavement under it. And every time, she had that same look on her face, amused, curious, a little dangerous. I didn't know whether she was interested in me or in something else entirely. But the way she watched me made it impossible to walk away. One evening, maybe a week after we met, she asked if I wanted to see the place she was renting. The house was on the edge of town, old but carefully maintained, with tall oak trees surrounding it like shields. There were boxes everywhere, barely unpacked, like she wasn't sure how long she'd stay. "This town is a stopover," she said when I commented about the boxes. Not a destination. But she didn't say where she'd come from, or where she was going. We ordered takeout, sat on the floor, and talked for hours. She told me about art, psychology, cities she lived in, mistakes she admitted half-jokingly. I told her about my life, which suddenly felt embarrassingly small next to hers. But she didn't mock me. If anything, she leaned in closer. "You underestimate yourself," she said. "People here do that to each other. It's contagious." Her words hit harder than they should have. Around midnight, I stood up to leave. She walked me to the door. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Her eyes scanned my face in that slow, deliberate way she had. Then she said something that stuck with me long after I left. Don't ask questions you're not ready to hear the answers to. She wasn't joking. I didn't know what she meant, but the tone carved itself into my memory. The next morning, the rumors started. Small towns are excellent at creating stories out of thin air. Someone saw us together. Someone else recognized her car. Someone else noticed she wasn't exactly blending in. By noon, I heard versions ranging from she's a divorcee to she's trouble to she's hiding from something. I tried to ignore it. But that night at work, she walked in again, this time with an expression that read annoyance mixed with something colder. "Your town talks too much," she said. I'd forgotten that. She leaned across the counter, lowering her voice. "If people ask where you met me, you say nothing. Not a word more than necessary." It wasn't a suggestion. It sounded like a rule. "Okay," I said, though I didn't understand why it mattered. Her gaze softened for a moment. "Good. I just don't like my life being the town hobby." She stayed until closing, distracting me with jokes, sharp observations, stories that revealed just enough to pull me in, never too much. Every detail felt curated. Looking back, that was the first sign something was off. When someone gives you pieces of a puzzle but never the edges, you should run. But I didn't. Not even when I started noticing the strange things. She always sat facing the door in restaurants. Her phone was always on silent, screen turned downward. She never let me pick her up at home. She always drove to me. She avoided Main Street entirely. She knew people's names in town before I introduced them. And one night, when she thought I wasn't looking, I saw her staring at an old flyer pinned to a bulletin board outside the bar. Her face went completely blank, like she wasn't Olivia anymore. Just someone waiting for something to return from the past. When she noticed me watching, she smiled, too quickly. "Let's go," she said. "It's loud here." She grabbed my hand, pulled me toward the parking lot, and didn't explain a thing. I should have asked. I should have pushed. I should have known that I was stepping into a story that began long before I entered it. But instead, I followed her like someone stepping deeper into a forest, unaware that the trail behind them was disappearing with every step. Everything felt thrilling, intense, addictive, and slowly, without noticing, I started breaking my own rules just to keep her close. Because whatever Olivia was hiding, I wasn't ready to let go of her long enough to figure it out. After that first evening, I couldn't stop thinking about her. It wasn't just her looks. It was the way she carried herself, calm and confident, like she'd seen everything and nothing could shake her. I kept replaying our conversation in my head, wondering if I'd said something stupid or if she even noticed me. The next day, I found myself walking past the little bookstore where we'd met, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. My heart leapt when I saw her inside, flipping through a collection of old poetry books. I hesitated, not wanting to seem creepy, but then she looked up and our eyes met. She smiled, just a slight, knowing curve of her lips, and my knees went weak. I worked up the courage to step inside. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. My voice came out louder than I intended. "Hey," she replied, raising an eyebrow, as if she already knew I'd be here. "Back for more literary wisdom?" I laughed nervously. "Something like that. I guess I'm curious about what you'd recommend." She handed me a book with a smirk. "Start with this. It's about people making mistakes and learning from them, eventually." Her tone was playful, but carried an edge I couldn't read yet. We ended up talking for nearly an hour. She shared stories about her life, her career, her travels, the mistakes she'd made, and I listened, captivated. I realized I could talk to her about anything, and she'd actually understand me. After that day, we started seeing each other more often. Coffee turned into lunch, lunch turned into dinner, and soon we were spending late nights at a small, quiet bar she loved. I learned about her favorite music, the shows she couldn't miss, and the way she laughed at the dumbest jokes. But there was a tension, too. She didn't talk about her past relationships much, and sometimes she'd disappear for a day or two without a word. I tried not to let it bother me, but curiosity gnawed at me. One night, I decided to confront it. "Why do you vanish sometimes?" I asked as we sat on the rooftop of her apartment building, looking over the town lights. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a sip of wine and stared at the horizon. "I've learned the hard way," she said finally. "People get too close, too fast. And sometimes, they betray you. I can't risk it again." I nodded, not knowing what to say. It made sense, but it also scared me. I didn't want to be just another chapter in her history. I wanted to be part of her story, the good part. Weeks passed. Our relationship deepened, but that tension lingered. Then, one evening, I saw her talking to a man I didn't recognize in the cafe where we first met. She looked angry, defensive, and something in my gut told me trouble was coming. Later that night, she explained. He was an old acquaintance, someone from her past who had wronged her. She tried to brush it off, but I could tell there was more. I offered to help, and she hesitated, but finally, she agreed. That was the first time our relationship shifted from attraction and curiosity to something heavier: trust, loyalty, and, unexpectedly, revenge. We started planning carefully, small moves to confront the past without drawing too much attention. I was learning about her life in ways I never imagined, and she was trusting me with her secrets. It was intoxicating but dangerous. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a story of a young guy falling for an older woman. It was a story of navigating loyalty, betrayal, and the dark edges of desire. Every choice mattered, and one mistake could destroy everything. The following week felt like a test. Every time we were together, I could see that shadow of the past lingering in her eyes. She'd be laughing one minute, and the next, tense and distant. I hated seeing her like that, but I also knew I couldn't push too hard. She had walls built from years of experience and betrayal, and I was just starting to learn how to navigate them. One evening, she invited me to her apartment for dinner. It was a quiet night, just the two of us. She cooked, which surprised me. She'd always seemed too busy for something as mundane as cooking, but it was intimate in a way I hadn't expected. I helped set the table, and we ate under the soft glow of a single lamp. "I don't usually do this," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Invite someone in. Let them see all of it." "See what?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Me. The mess, the mistakes, everything that I try to hide." Her honesty caught me off guard. I wanted to reach across the table and tell her it was okay, that I didn't care about the past, but instead, I just nodded. That night, we talked for hours. About her work, her travels, and eventually, about the man from her past, the one who had caused so much pain. "He thinks he can control me still," she said, her voice low and tense. "But he has no idea who I am now, or who I can be." That line made something click inside me. I realized that part of being with her wasn't just about romance. It was about being on her side, supporting her through the chaos of life she couldn't escape. And she, in turn, was trusting me with her vulnerabilities, which scared and thrilled me all at once. Over the next few days, our plans became more deliberate. Small gestures, like showing up at places he frequented, leaving subtle warnings, and gathering information. I learned a side of her I'd never imagined. The strategic, fearless woman who could plan and execute with precision. I couldn't help but be drawn to it, even as my heart raced with anxiety about crossing lines I'd never imagined crossing before. Then came the night that changed everything. We were supposed to confront him, not with violence, but with exposure, make sure he understood the consequences of his actions. I was nervous, my hands shaking as we drove through the quiet streets of our town. Every light, every shadow felt amplified. When we arrived, he wasn't alone. That made her pause for a fraction of a second. She looked at me, and I nodded. She could do this. She'd been waiting for this moment longer than I could ever imagine. The confrontation was tense. Words were exchanged, threats implied but unspoken. She didn't shout. She didn't beg. She simply stated the facts, the wrongs, and the outcomes, with a calm that was terrifying. I watched as he realized the power had shifted. He had underestimated her, underestimated both of us. Afterwards, we walked back to her apartment in silence. The air was thick with adrenaline. Neither of us spoke much, but I could feel a shift in our dynamic. We weren't just two people dating anymore. We were partners in something much bigger, something intense and dangerous, bound by trust, loyalty, and the thrill of having confronted the past together. That night, as we sat on her balcony, I realized how complicated and exhilarating our relationship had become. I'd thought I knew what love was, but this was something else entirely. A mix of passion, respect, and raw, unfiltered emotion that left me constantly on edge, always wanting more, and scared of losing her in the same instant. The days after the confrontation were tense in a different way. The immediate threat had passed, but the adrenaline hadn't left our veins. Every glance, every touch, felt electric. I could see her walls slowly lowering, but only in tiny increments. And yet, there was still that edge, her past, her experiences, and the knowledge that she had survived things I couldn't even imagine. We started spending more time outside the chaos, trying to reclaim some sense of normalcy. Walks through the small town streets, coffee at the little diner on Main Street, movie nights in her apartment. But even in these calm moments, I noticed how careful she was, how she measured everything she said, every expression. It fascinated me, how someone so confident could be so cautious. One afternoon, while helping her organize papers in her office, I found a stack of letters tied together with a ribbon. Curiosity got the better of me. "These are old letters," she said, noticing my interest. Her voice was calm, but carried a weight I hadn't heard before. "From before I moved here. From people who hurt me. From people I had to outsmart." I nodded, not wanting to pry too much, but I felt closer to her in that moment. She was trusting me with pieces of her life she rarely shared with anyone. I realized then that this wasn't just about attraction or thrill. It was about connection, understanding, and mutual respect in the face of complexity. That night, things took a turn. We were sitting on her balcony, watching the sunset over the town, when her phone buzzed. The man from her past had sent a message, a thinly veiled threat. She showed me, her fingers trembling slightly. "He thinks he can intimidate me," she said quietly, eyes fixed on the horizon. "But he doesn't know we've learned. He doesn't know I've changed." I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't just about romance anymore. This was about survival, about strategy, about being ready for whatever came next. She turned to me, eyes blazing with determination. "I need you with me," she said. From that moment, our dynamic shifted again. We became a team in a new sense, partners navigating not just emotions, but strategy and potential danger. Every plan we made, every step we took, reinforced trust and intimacy in a way that words never could. But the tension wasn't just external. Internally, I wrestled with my feelings. How much risk was I willing to take for someone I loved? How far could I go to protect her, to support her, without losing myself in the process? I was learning, fast, that being in a relationship with someone like her was as thrilling as it was terrifying. Then came the moment that changed everything. She asked me to confront him, not just with words or subtle warnings, but with a plan that would expose everything he had done. I hesitated, fear and excitement colliding inside me. But when I looked at her, I saw the trust she had placed in me, and I knew I couldn't back down. The night of the confrontation, the town was quiet. We moved through the streets like shadows, hearts pounding, every step deliberate. When we finally faced him, the air was thick with tension. I watched her speak, calm but firm, her every word cutting through the lies he had built around himself. And I realized, this was more than revenge. It was liberation for both of us. Afterwards, as we walked back home, neither of us spoke much. The adrenaline still lingered, but so did a new sense of intimacy, of shared purpose. I knew our story was only beginning. The days after the confrontation felt surreal. The tension between us didn't vanish. Instead, it transformed into a strange, almost magnetic energy. Every time we touched, there was that spark, the kind that made me forget the world outside her apartment. But alongside the attraction, there was a quiet understanding. Things had changed forever. She invited me to her small-town gallery opening one evening, a local artist showcase she had been supporting for years. Walking into that space, surrounded by paintings and sculptures, I saw a softer side of her, one I hadn't noticed in the adrenaline-charged moments we'd shared before. She laughed with friends, discussed art passionately, and yet, there was still a certain guardedness in her gaze when she looked at me. Later, as we walked back through the quiet streets, she took my hand. "I want you to see all of me," she said softly. "The strong, the vulnerable, everything. But it comes with risks." "I don't care about risks," I said, gripping her hand tighter. "I just want to be with you." For a while, it seemed like things were normal, or as normal as our lives could be. We spent weekends exploring nearby towns, having late-night conversations in diners, and sharing quiet moments on the rooftop of her building. I learned about her fears, her dreams, and her subtle, dry humor that could make me laugh even on my worst days. But the calm was deceptive. One evening, while she was working late, I noticed her phone buzzing repeatedly. Curiosity got the better of me, and I saw messages from someone new. Someone who claimed to have information about her past and threatened to reveal secrets that could ruin her carefully built life. She noticed me reading and sighed. "I was hoping I wouldn't have to involve you in this yet," she said, her voice tight. "But it seems the past isn't done with me." The next few days were a blur. We strategized, carefully crafting moves to protect her and ourselves without escalating danger. It was intense, and I realized how much I had already come to depend on her, not just emotionally, but also in navigating this complicated life. One night, after a particularly stressful day, we ended up at her apartment, exhausted. I watched her sink into the couch, eyes heavy, and realized she never let herself be vulnerable around anyone, not until now. I sat beside her, wrapped an arm around her, and she leaned into me. "I've never done this before," she whispered. "Let anyone in, I mean. But you feel different." "I feel the same," I replied. "You don't have to hide from me." That night, we talked for hours. About trust, love, and the thin line between loyalty and obsession. I realized our relationship had evolved far beyond simple attraction. We were partners in a world that demanded vigilance, yet also in a romance that felt electric, dangerous, and intoxicating all at once. But life in a small town has its own way of complicating things. Word spreads fast, and soon whispers about us reached people who shouldn't know. One evening, as we walked home from a late-night diner, I noticed strangers' eyes lingering a little too long, their conversations abruptly stopping as we passed. The feeling of being watched was unnerving. She noticed it too. "Small towns are like that," she said grimly. "Everyone wants to know your business. Sometimes, the real threat isn't from the past. It's from the people pretending to be innocent." And that's when I realized that our story wasn't just about love and revenge. It was also about survival, trust, and navigating a world where danger and desire were intertwined. Every choice we made now had consequences. Every moment carried weight, and every shared secret made us stronger, yet more vulnerable at the same time. Tension in the town was growing, subtle but unmistakable. People stared, whispered, and watched our every move. I could feel the weight of curiosity pressing down on us, but she seemed almost energized by it, a predator in her element. I, on the other hand, was still learning how to navigate the dangerous thrill that came with being close to her. One evening, she asked me to meet her at the edge of town, near the old abandoned mill. "We need to settle something," she said over the phone. Her voice was calm, but there was an intensity that made my stomach twist. When I arrived, she was already there, leaning against the rusted metal, eyes scanning the shadows. "He's not done," she said, "and I need you to be ready. This is bigger than anything we've dealt with before." I nodded, adrenaline surging. Up until that moment, I thought I understood what it meant to be in a relationship with her, but now I realized I was only scratching the surface. This was no longer just romance. It was strategy, loyalty, and a test of how far I was willing to go. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was him, older, confident, and arrogant. But now there was fear in his eyes, subtle, almost imperceptible. He thought he could intimidate her, but he underestimated the lengths we'd gone to prepare. "Leave now," she said, voice steady, carrying the authority of someone who had faced far worse than him, "or you'll regret it." He laughed at first, but then I noticed the change. He realized the power dynamics had shifted. My heart pounded as I stood beside her, silently supporting her, feeling the intensity of our combined force. She didn't just want revenge, she wanted justice, and I was part of it now. After the encounter, we walked home in silence. The adrenaline was still in our veins, but there was a strange calm too, a satisfaction in knowing we had faced the storm together. That night, as we sat on her balcony, the town lights below flickering softly, she rested her head on my shoulder. "I've never felt like this before," she whispered. "Safe and alive at the same time." I smiled, realizing that our bond was no longer just about attraction. It was about trust, partnership, and the unspoken understanding that we could face anything together. The next few days brought a sense of cautious normalcy. We went to local cafes, strolled through the parks, and even laughed without fear of being watched or interrupted. But I knew deep down that peace was temporary. In a town like ours, secrets didn't stay buried for long, and every move we made would ripple outward. Then came a letter slipped under her door. No name, no signature, just a warning. You think you've won. You haven't seen anything yet. Her eyes darkened as she read it. This isn't over, she said quietly, more to herself than to me. And in that moment, I realized our relationship had changed in a way I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about love, attraction, or even revenge. It was about navigating a world that demanded constant vigilance, where desire and danger were intertwined, and where trust was both our weapon and our shield. We spent that night planning, strategizing, and preparing for whatever was coming next. Every whispered conversation, every careful glance, every shared secret brought us closer together, but also pulled us into a dangerous dance that I couldn't imagine leaving. By the time dawn broke over the town, I understood one truth. Being with her wasn't just a choice. It was a commitment. A commitment to trust, to loyalty, and to facing a world that would challenge us in ways I had never thought possible. And somehow, despite all the chaos, the adrenaline, and the risk, I couldn't imagine my life without her. The tension in our small town escalated quickly after the anonymous warning. Every street, every shop, every familiar face seemed like it could harbor a secret. I noticed her becoming more alert, more cautious, moving with the precision of someone who had learned from experience. I followed her lead, trying to match her vigilance, but deep down I felt the weight of being in uncharted territory. One evening, she pulled me aside at the diner where we often met. "We need to be careful," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "They're watching. Whoever sent that letter knows more than we think." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I had never been part of anything like this. Love? Sure. Passion? Definitely. But fear, danger, and strategy all mixed together in a way I wasn't fully prepared for. And yet, I trusted her completely. That night, we devised a plan. She had contacts, people she trusted, people who owed her favors. We would gather information, find out who was behind the letters, and neutralize the threat before it escalated further. It was like a chess game, each move calculated, each decision loaded with potential consequences. Over the next few days, we moved through the town almost invisibly, blending in while gathering intel. She taught me how to read people, how to notice small details that revealed intentions, how to anticipate deception. I was learning more than I ever expected, not just about her past, but about the nature of trust and manipulation. Then, one night, we discovered a clue, an address scribbled on a receipt from the diner. It led to a storage unit on the outskirts of town. My heart raced as we drove there, adrenaline pumping through my veins. She didn't hesitate, didn't falter. She moved with purpose, and I followed, feeling both fear and exhilaration. Inside the storage unit, we found evidence of surveillance, photos, notes, recordings. Whoever had been watching her had been meticulous. And yet, I could see how she had anticipated most of it, how she had prepared for this confrontation long before I had even met her. "This is why I'm careful," she said, her voice calm but fierce. "People like him, they think they can control the story. But we write our own ending." That night, as we left the storage unit and drove back into town, I realized the depth of our connection. This wasn't just attraction or infatuation. It was partnership, loyalty, and an understanding that we could face anything together. And somehow, the danger only made our bond stronger, more intense, more electric. Back at her apartment, we sat in silence, the weight of what we had discovered settling around us. She poured wine, and I watched her, noticing the subtle ways she relaxed even under pressure. "You've changed me," she said softly. "I used to believe that trusting someone was a weakness. But you make me feel stronger." I reached out, taking her hand. "You make me feel alive," I admitted. "Like nothing else matters when I'm with you." For a moment, everything else faded. The town, the danger, the secrets. It was just us, together, bound by something deeper than love or desire. Trust forged in fire, tested by challenges, and solidified by shared experiences. But I knew, as we sat there quietly, that the calm would not last. Small towns have long memories, and past actions have a way of catching up. Whoever had been behind the letters wasn't done, and the story of our relationship was far from over. As we leaned against each other that night, I realized one truth. Being with her was no longer just about romance. It was about navigating a world that demanded cunning, loyalty, and courage. And I was willing to face it all, For her, for us, and for the story we were writing together. The tension in the town reached a breaking point. Rumors had spread, eyes were watching, and every step we took felt like walking on a wire. But she remained calm, collected, and ruthless in her approach. I had learned to follow her lead, but even I could feel the weight of what was coming. This was more than love or revenge, it was survival. One night, we discovered that the person behind the letters had infiltrated deeper than we expected. Evidence pointed to someone close to her past, someone she thought she had left behind. My stomach twisted as she laid out the plan to confront them directly. "We end this tonight," she said, eyes sharp, unwavering. "No mistakes. No hesitation." I nodded, feeling the adrenaline spike. Fear and excitement collided inside me, but I trusted her implicitly. She had led every step of this journey, and I knew she would guide us through the storm. We arrived at a small, secluded warehouse on the edge of town. Shadows stretched across the walls, and the air was thick with anticipation. She moved with precision, her calmness masking the intensity beneath. I followed closely, heart pounding, every sense alert. Inside, the confrontation began. Words were exchanged, sharp, controlled, cutting through layers of lies and manipulation. I watched as she asserted herself, exposing the deception and intimidation that had haunted her for years. Every glance, every movement, every word carried the weight of someone who had learned to fight for herself. And then, the moment came. The person realized the tables had turned. Fear replaced arrogance. They had underestimated her, underestimated us. I felt a surge of pride and awe. This was more than revenge. It was justice, meticulously executed. After the confrontation, we left the warehouse in silence. The adrenaline still lingered, but so did a strange sense of liberation. We had faced the threat together, and in doing so, our bond had deepened in ways I couldn't have imagined. Back at her apartment, the quiet of the night wrapped around us. She poured 2 glasses of wine, and we sat on the balcony, overlooking the small town that had witnessed so much of our story. "You've changed everything for me," she whispered, eyes reflecting the lights below. "I never thought I'd let anyone in like this, and now I can't imagine being without you." I took her hand, feeling the electric connection that had carried us through danger, trust, and desire. "I feel the same," I said. "We've been through chaos, but we've come out stronger. Together." For a moment, we simply sat there, letting the silence speak volumes. The town was quiet, but our hearts were loud with everything we had experienced. The attraction, the fear, the strategy, the trust, and the love that had grown in the most unexpected circumstances. But even in that calm, I knew our story wasn't over. Small towns have long memories, and past actions have a way of resurfacing. Whoever had tried to control her life wouldn't give up so easily. And yet, we were ready. Together, stronger, and bound by something deeper than mere infatuation. I realized then that being with her wasn't just about romance. It was about trust, loyalty, and facing a world where danger and desire were intertwined. Every choice we made had consequences, and every secret we shared drew us closer. But we were willing to face it all, because together, we were unstoppable. That night, as we finally rested, I understood the truth of our journey. Love, trust, and revenge weren't separate paths. They were threads woven into a story that was uniquely ours, thrilling, dangerous, and unforgettable. The calm after the storm didn't last long. Small towns have a way of remembering, of noticing things that outsiders might miss. But we were ready. Every move, every plan, every step we had taken led to this moment, the point where our story would either solidify or unravel. It started with a tip, a message left anonymously at her apartment. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was a challenge. Someone wanted to see if we had truly changed the game, if we were as capable as we seemed. She looked at me, a mixture of determination and amusement in her eyes. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. "Always." We traced the source to a secluded cabin in the woods just outside town. Shadows stretched long in the fading light as we approached, and my heart raced. She moved like a predator, calm and precise, while I followed, alert and tense. Every step felt like it could change the course of everything. Inside, we found the orchestrator of the chaos, a former associate of her past adversary. He looked confident at first, but that confidence crumbled when he realized who he was dealing with. She didn't speak much, didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough. But when she did, her words were sharp, controlled, and final. "You thought you could manipulate me," she said. "You thought you could control what happens in this town. You were wrong. And now it ends." The man faltered. I could see the fear replacing his arrogance. He realized, too late, that we were not the same people he had underestimated months ago. Together, we had become a force he could not defeat, emotionally, mentally, and strategically. When it was over, we left the cabin without looking back. The forest was silent, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of peace. The danger had passed, the threats neutralized, and the town that had watched us so closely was none the wiser. Back in her apartment, we finally allowed ourselves to relax. She poured 2 glasses of wine, and we sat on the balcony, the small town spread out below us like a map of everything we had endured. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by something stronger, something enduring. "I never thought I'd let anyone in like this," she whispered. "But you've changed everything." "And you've changed me," I replied. "I didn't just fall for you. I grew with you, learned with you, fought with you, and I wouldn't trade any of it." We sat in silence for a long time, letting the night carry us, reflecting on the journey we had shared. It wasn't just a story of love. It wasn't just revenge. It was a tale of trust, risk, passion, and resilience. Every choice we made, every danger we faced, brought us closer and defined what we had together. In the weeks that followed, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. We walked the streets, laughed at the diner, and shared quiet moments that felt sacred after everything. But the intensity, the connection, the knowledge that we had faced and conquered danger together, none of that faded. It became the foundation of what we were building, a love that was fierce, unshakable, and uniquely ours. As I watched her one evening, the sunset painting the sky, I realized something profound. This relationship, forged in trust, danger, and passion, was more than either of us could have imagined. And I knew, without a doubt, that whatever came next, we would face it together. Because in a small town where secrets linger and danger hides in plain sight, we had discovered something rare, a bond that could survive anything. Love, trust, and revenge had intertwined into a story that was ours alone, and it was just the beginning.